Hello, this is TIMJ and welcome to a new tutorial. First of all, if you want to get in contact with me, just hit me up via my website or Instagram. And by the way, I got a Patreon, so if you subscribe there, you will get a bunch of exclusive tutorials. So, without further talk, hello and welcome to beginner number 8. So in that tutorial I don't want to cover like a specific topic. I just want to show you some basics, some shortcuts and so on. Okay, let's get started. So first of all, a quick tip. If you place down a geometry and you got your big network view here, you can press P on your keyboard and you will get this parameter panel here. So a lot of you ask that over time, and it's the button P for parameters. So you can enable and disable that, for example. Another thing, when you try to lay out your stuff or need more space in a specific window, you can hit Control B and it will enlarge the window. So for example, for the network view here or for the scene view. So you can just do that, for example. Okay, so then I placed down a geometry container. Let's place one down again. So to get the tab menu, just press tab here or press right click and you will get the same thing. I will place down a geometry container and we will just create a little basic setup, and yeah, so I will rename that to geo, let's call it basic, and I will just give you some tips and tricks for today's tutorial. So first of all, we will start, for example, with a sphere as a polygon, and I will pipe up the frequency a little bit, maybe to 15. The first thing a lot of people ask is, how can I scatter like points on a surface and then make a random scale? So that's pretty easy. You got your sphere here, and then you can place down a scatter node. And the scatter node will scatter points onto the surface. So this is now our surface here, and we can then scatter points onto that. So currently we've got 1,000 points here on our sphere, and the cool thing is, of course, in Houdini it's procedural. So if we change the scale of the sphere, you can see the scattered points will adapt to the shape of the sphere. So now we got our 1,000 points here on our sphere. If you want to make the points more clear or more visible, you can press D in your scene view window, go on geometry, and then particles and the point size. You can just pipe that up a little bit, and now you can see your points a little bit better, for example. So now we scattered some points onto the surface here, and what we can do, we can dial that up, and of course we can dial it down to just maybe 2 points. That's fully up to you. Let's go for maybe 500 points here, and what I want to do, I want to copy again a sphere onto that with a different scale. So that's pretty easy. Just place down a copy the points. So copy to P, C, T, P, and that node will require 2 inputs. So first input is the geometry to copy, and the second input are a target point to copy to. So these are our target points, so just connect that. And by the way, you can change your wire style here from straight to like this curved wire style with Shift S. Okay, we've got our copy to points node, but currently we will get an error, not enough sources specified. So we need, of course, the geometry to copy. We can use the sphere, for example. So we can plug the sphere in here. Let's go with maybe a frequency of 5 here, or let's do 10. And we've got now our spheres copied onto the points, but the spheres are way too big. So to do that, we can use really a lot of ways. We can use vex, we can use warps, or predefined nodes. So we will use a predefined node. It's called the attribute randomize. So we will grab that and place it down here. And by default, it will randomize the color. So what you can see now is we've got our points here, but the point's color is fully randomized. It's different on each point, and that will transfer on our copied geometry. So if you can see here, copying the attributes, and there should be a CD somewhere, CD for color, yeah, especially the star, everything. So if we, for example, delete the star here, it will not copy the color. But if we go with comma and get a CD here, so CD is the built-in attribute for color, it will copy the color onto our spheres. So let's just go back to the default here. Okay, let's just place a new copy the points. Copy the points and just copy it again. So we will end up with something like this. Of course you can randomize the color if you want to. That's fully up to you. But what I will randomize the p-scale. So just type attribute name p-scale. And you will get a whole different look here, because we now randomize the copying scale of our input, so in this case the sphere. What we can do, we can then influence the global scale, and now you can see we've got a different scale on each copied sphere. So that's pretty powerful, because you can do a lot of cool procedural setups with that. But the cool thing is, we are currently on a uniform distribution, so a min and a max value. What we can do, we can go to custom ramp, and now some spheres will get the scale of 0. So if we go on to our attribute randomize, to our geometry spreadsheet, you can see some scales are really low, and we don't want that. So for example, on the first point here on our custom ramp, we can go to maybe 0.1. And now you can see every sphere will get a scale here. So not like these really low scales here. So for example, that one. Of course, maybe you want it, maybe not. So 0.1, for example. And now you can, of course, dial several attribute randomize nodes after the other. So, for example, a randomize node, attribute randomize, and use that, for example, for the color. And then you can transfer your color later, maybe into the render engine, and create a color ramp there from the color attributes sitting here on your geometry. Of course, you can make it one-dimensional and make a gray scale coloring, for example. So this is like the first thing, just randomize point scales and then transfer that into copy to points and influence the scale. Another thing on the attribute randomize with the p-scale, you can go on options and you can dial in like a global seed, so you can just get a different iteration of the p-scale on the points. So this is like the global seed parameter. Then the global scale, of course, this is like a scale multiplier for each point, and then the distribution. What you also can do, you can fit the values, for example, in the uniform distribution. Cool. So this is like the first thing. The second thing we can do, we can talk about. Let's talk about pops. Pops, the particles. I really like particles because you can do a lot of cool things with that. So we'll just copy the sphere. You can hold Alt on your keyboard and then just copy the nodes here. So that's a pretty handy way. So just I will just get a sphere here. And what I want to do, I want to place down a pop network. And that will be like a really simple pop network here. So we will create particles, basically points. And what you can see when you play our simulation, you can see a bunch of particles will spawn in. So first tip, with the arrow up key you can start your simulation, and with the arrow down key you can basically let it go backwards. And for example, with arrow key left and right, you can specifically toggle between the frames. And again, for example, I want to view this simulation a little bit larger, just press, for example, in this case, Control B, and enlarge your window here. Cool. So we spawned a bunch of particles, and we will dive inside to the particle network here. And what you can see here is our source. So this is that will be our particle source. It will spawn the particles and inherit maybe attributes, for example the color on the surface or velocities to drive the particles. Then we got our solver here, and of course our pop object. This is like these are like our particles. And here are different parameters or toggles you can change. And what I want to do now, we got like scatter on the surface. So this is just like the scatter node here. So we will scatter particles, or we will spawn particles on the surface. You can use all points. You can use all geometry. You can use points, or then scatter onto the surface. So for example, what you can do, you can just grab the scatter node here, get the 500 particles, and now we can select all points. That will redirect our impulse activation to 1, so we will emit particles. Let's go and place down a pop wind. And with the pop wind we can just get a little bit of an amplitude here. And you can now see we will basically on each frame we will impulse like 1 activation, and we will spawn particles from our points we previously placed on the surface. So that's a pretty cool way to basically set up a simple particle simulation. Another cool thing to do, you can use, for example, the scatter, but you also can use a more organized way. So you can use the add node, delete geometry but keep the points, and add and feed that into the .NET. And now we will get a much more organized first distribution or initialization of the particles. So I think that's pretty cool too. For example, if you want to do something more organized or with a lower kind of entropy, to say. So I think that's pretty cool too, especially when you then play with the topology itself and then convert that back to points. So for example, a grid of course will give you a whole another simulation than a sphere. So I placed down a grid, and here's another quick tip. If you want to reference a parameter, you can just right click, copy parameter, and then paste relative reference. So it will now reference the rows parameter. Or what you can do, even simpler than that, you can just drag and drop it on here, relative channel reference, and you're done. And when you feed that now into here, of course you will get a really organized point grid here, and you can spawn your particles onto that, and maybe get something like that one here. So another thing that will currently spawn every frame particles, and it will keep on spawning and spawning, so we are now at 475,000 particles. But maybe you want the particles to die at a certain point. And what you can do that with a life expectancy. So the life expectancy is currently on 100 seconds, and that's pretty high because we only got, currently we got frame per second initialized by 24 frames, so we will divide a second in 24 frames, and we got like 240 seconds, so we got 10 seconds in total, but this is 100 seconds. So for example, our timeline needs to be at least 10 times more longer to hit the life expectancy. But what we can do, we can just dial it down to maybe 2 seconds, and then we can introduce a life variance. So the life variance will then randomize the life expectancy in a certain amount. So you can, for example, type 0.5, and let's have a look on that. So our particles will live 2 seconds, and then we got our life variance in there, and looks much better. So another thing, let's go for a full life expectancy, and let's disable the life variance. I will go on the birth tab here, and what I want to do, I want to just emit particles on the first frame. So $FF equals 1. That's like a really simple expression, but it tells the pop source, hey pop source, only emit particles on the first frame, and that's it. So we'll just emit one time here. And that's pretty cool because we can, let's go back to our lovely sphere here, and let's introduce some speed. So what I want to do, let's go for a normal, or let's go for an WOP here, an attribute WOP, and I want to create V, so a specific velocity, and we will dive inside here. So double click, and the normal will be the velocity. So just get the normal to the velocity. And now what you can see when we click on here, on the information button, on the V here, we can see our velocity vector. And we will pipe that in, or it's already piped in, to our source first input, attributes, inherit attributes. So we will import like attributes from the source geometry. So basically our source geometry are these points currently, and we will inherit our velocity. So it's currently on star, so it will inherit every attribute that will sit on the surface and is compatible. Inherit velocity here, 1. So we will inherit that. So you can see, let's just deactivate our pop wind, so you can see our particle will get drived outwards in a spherical pattern. So that's pretty cool. And now when we also introduce like a little bit of pop wind and a little bit of up force and amplitude and maybe a larger swivel size, you can see we've got like here this outcoming burst, and then the particles will slowly get lifted up because of the wind velocity here. And the cool thing is, what you can do after that, you can use a trail and trail your points. So connect these polygons. The close row, we will declick that, and the trail length 240. And now we got a bunch of lines that will grow. That's like another really basic thing to do. And now of course you can watch the other beginners tutorials, or especially the process or the R&D videos, and then process that further, for example. Cool, so we did that and that. A few other things. So if you got like a box here, and let's say, oh no, let's do it like that. Okay, let's just delete that. And you got here you got your points here. And what you want to do, you want to merge like the points and the initial sphere. So these are now 2000. Let's go with that, the p-scale. Let's go with the spheres and the copy the points. Let's connect that in here, that in here, that in here. So we got now our spheres, but we want the original sphere. There is a merge node, so you can merge stuff. So they copy the points, merged with the sphere. Cool. But a quicker way is select that, and now hold Alt and just drag out here and let go. And now you got placed down your merge node, and you merged it just with just really quicker. So now we can, for example, merge that and render that out, for example. So we've got that. Looks pretty funny. Oh yeah, that's a cool thing to toggle on. VDBs. Let's go with VDBs. Let me just get like that one here, like a frequency of 6, and I will pump up the scale here a little bit more, and I will also increase the global scale a little bit. And what we can do, we can work with VDBs. So for example, place down a VDB from polygon 2 times. And what we can do, we can initialize a VDB out of our sphere here. And now we can see it's a surface VDB. It got 7,695 voxels and a voxel size of 0.1. So this is like now our a voxel geometry here. And what we can do, we can pipe that up. So for example 0.05, 0.1 and so on. So now we can see the individual polygons because the resolution is much more higher. You can do just a simple subdivide here on loop and just subdivide it a little bit more to get rid of the of the individual polygons, or of the look of the individual polygons. So what we can do, we can use the same VDB from polygons on our little spheres, and now we can combine them. So place down a VD combine node, And now let's do like a difference. So now we will, it's like a Boolean operation, but in voxels. So now what we will do, we'll subtract a minus b. So we will got here our little spheres, and we will subtract the big sphere. You can press Shift R to cross the inputs, and now you will get something like that. So of course let's make the resolution higher on here. So here it's 0.01, let's go to 0.05, and I think that's 0.052, yeah. And of course you can dial up the resolution here also a little bit. And we will get something like that. Of course now it's simulation driven, so it will go out, or it will fade out over time. That's a cool effect maybe. And we can convert that back. So convert VDB, hook that up to polygons. And now we've got a polygonal geometry, and you can render that, for example. And now the cool thing is, of course, we got our simulation here, and when you play that and cache it out, you will get like the little craters like bend out, and yeah, you will got your original sphere here. Cool. Another thing is the VDB Smooth. So with VDB you can really do a lot of cool things. The VDB Smooth SCF. So if we got a higher global scale here, something higher, maybe 0.25, and let's have a look how that will look. Okay, that's maybe too large. Oh, that looks pretty funny. Let's go to 0.185. We got a VDB Smooth here, and what the VDB Smooth does, just like a smooth node, it will smooth out the voxel shape that's given to the input. And you can change like your iterations here, and you can see it will get smoother and smoother and smoother, and you can dial in like 50 iterations here, and it will get pretty smooth. So it's eventually like a noise. Oh, we can toggle that too. Noise is nice. Okay, like now let's go back to the 5 iteration. I think the default one was, I think 4, yeah. And now you can see without the VDB Smooth and with the VDB Smooth. So you can play with that, for example. Cool. So this is like a small exploration of the VDBs. And let's do another one, again with the sphere. Let's toggle some noise here. So we got now a pretty low frequency sphere, so I want to pump that up to maybe 150, or let's go higher, let's go 250 on the frequency scale. And we got now like 1.25 million polygons or primitives, but of course we can dial it much higher. But what I want to do, I want to introduce you to some noise. Make some noise. I will place down a point warp, or you can place down an attribute warp. That's fully up to you. I will call it create this underscore noise. So create displaced noise. So we will displace now our sphere with noise. Sound simply is, and it's pretty simply or easy. So now we are in a WAP, and the WAP got several inputs here. So for example, the position, the velocity, the force, the age, life, ID, color, for example the point number, the inputs on the specific node, so up here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, And the cool thing is we can play with that inputs. Of course, these are like the standard inputs. Of course, you can then bind attributes in here and then further manipulate and then export them out again. Cool, so we got our position. Let's go with a noise. So if you go press tab and go under noise, you will find some pretty handy noise patterns here, or noise nodes. For example, the anti-aliased noise, the unified noise, static flow noise is pretty cool, and the turbulent noise. So they are all cool. Everything will be better with noise. I will place down an anti-aliased noise for the beginning and just pipe that into position, and the noise, for example, to the color. And now you can see we created noise onto our surface. That's really cool. But the cool thing is we can displace our sphere with that noise. So we've got now our anti-aliased noise, and be aware some noises are on the output level. They are on, for example, the anti-aliased noise is on an output level from minus 0.5 to 0.5, so it's not fitted. So you can fit it, for example, to 0 to 1 or to minus 1 to 1. But currently I think that's fine. So we'll just disconnect that, and we will place down a displace along normal node. And the displace along normal node will require the position, so we can just get a position here and pipe it into the position, and then the amount we want to displace it. So this is our noise, pipe that into amount and pipe that back into position. And now you can see we displaced our sphere. Pretty easy. And the cool thing is what you now can do. Let me just show you that with with a second noise. We can pipe a noise into a noise. So for example something like that, and get a frequency up here, and pipe then that noise displaced by a noise into the position, and displace the position by that noise influenced by a noise. So we will get something like that here. So I think that's pretty cool. So try that out, pump noises into noises, and then to the amount, to the color, and so on. So we will end up with something like that. Of course, there are a whole bunch of other noises. For example, the unified noise static. So the unified noise static is a pretty handy and pretty big node, because you got your signature and you can get a bunch of signatures. But the cool thing is the noise type. So you can choose of a variety of noise types. So for example, a Perlin noise, a simplex, then the volley, cellular, Manhattan noises. So that's pretty cool. Let's try them out. So again, position, into the position, and for example, just for now to visualize that, the noise into the color. So for example, let's start with the Manhattan here, and we can then influence the frequency. Let's get a parameter, so a constant, not a parameter, we will get a constant just for now. I will show you a parameter in a second. The constant, just pipe that, for example, into the frequency. And now you can influence the frequency with one value here. And now we can pipe that into the amount, and you will get this like really rocky noise. So another thing what you can do, scale. You can adjust the scale. Or another cool thing is, let's go for a relative bounding box. We will get the position and the file here, so our first input and our position, and we'll pipe that into the color. And this is now our bounding box represented in a three-dimensional space. But for example, I just want from up and down, or from left to right. That's pretty easy. Go to vector to float, get a vector to float, pipe the bounding box data into the vector here, and what we can do now, let's just disable our displacement by normal here. We can go x, y, z. So x, pipe that to the color, and you will get a ramp from basically 0 to 1 on the x direction. Then the y direction, so from up, from bottom to top, and the z direction, basically from right to left or left to right. So that's pretty cool because we can use that value and pipe that into the scale, for example. And you will get a lower scale on the bottom and a higher scale on the top. And even better, we can influence that. Place down a ramp parameter, pipe it in here, change the ramp to a spline ramp, and you will see nothing. And then we will get our parameter, multiply, pipe it in here, and place down a parameter node and pipe it in here. And let's call that mult_scale. Let's dive up one level, and now you can see we've got our ramp here, our little ramp, and we can influence the ramp. Let's pipe that up, and nothing will happen because mult_scale. There we go. And now you can influence the ramp. We can influence our relative bounding box value. So basically our ramp, we can influence that with the spline ramp here. And we can create like our displacement. For example, from high 0.5, the middle, to like, let's go -2 or -0.5, to again to 1. So of course that's fully up to you, or you can just use the other direction. So x, y, you can use it like that or like that. So again, let's go here to 0. And we've got our parameter that will multiply our displacement scale. So you can pipe that up to, for example, to 3, and you will get something like that. So that's pretty cool. And of course, what you can do, let's go to the unified noise static. You can hit the fractal and maybe, for example, the hybrid terrain. And then you can play like with these value and introduce some additional detail. Cool. So we got that. So noises are pretty powerful, and the cool thing is you can animate, for example, the ramp here. And make a little animation out of that. So we got something like that here. Cool, so let's do a quick rendering of that. So of course place a null here, so we get a little bit of rendering involved too. So out maybe shape. So we toggled like different scales, we toggled 3dB, a little bit of simulation, merging and noise, and I think that's pretty handy to know. So we've got that here. And now we can make a simple rendering out of that. What I will use Redshift to render that. Let's go with a ROP network and a material network. So RSMat, Redshift materials, and RSArt. Let's dive inside and place down a Redshift node. RSArt 001. I'll just dial in some settings here. Global illumination, ACG, optics RT is enabled. Cool. Then we will need a camera, of course, and a material. So RS material builder. Let's call that RS mat shape, and we'll link that up. And now again, a quick tip: place down the material, and now there are several ways to link that up. For example, material, just click here on the open floating operator chooser and navigate to your RS mat and hit accept. That's the first way. There is a second way, or there are several ways. So this is the first way. The second way is to just go into your RS mat or in your material network, hit Control C, so copy, go in here, Control V for paste it. Or you can just hit Shift W, that's what I usually do, and you will get a little tree viewer and just drag and drop your material in here. So that's pretty much the same thing. So we now linked up our material. We got our redshift setup done, but we will need a RS light dome, so we'll need a light, of course. And with C you can enable the color palette and color your nodes, for example. If you drag and drop a color with control, so for example, all my Azure wangles and with wax and VDBs are blue, so you can do that, and round you can just drag and drop a color on here and it will get permanently baked into your Houdini version. And you will, when you place down again the shape, you will get it always red and round, for example, but I want that blue. Okay, cool. And of course set for the shape palette, so you can just drag and drop shapes too with control. And yeah, so let's dive up again. So our RS material is linked. We got our RS oh yeah, our light. We need a dome light, for example. So RS dome 001. I will just get a dome light here. HDI. Let's go with that one here. Cool. Let's go into our camera. Be sure to lock your camera, because if you don't lock the camera, you will not influence the position. And now, yeah, it's just fully up to you how you will render that little shape. Of course, you can render the lines, etc. also. But let's go just with that simple shape here. Another thing what you can do, of course, that's currently let's go to smooth wire shaded. It's currently pretty rigid, and what we can do, we maybe get the octaves maybe to 5 and the roughness a little bit higher here, so to get such a little bit more subtle detail here. And now we can make a render here. So pretty simple render, of course, currently. So, and there you have it. Of course, pretty simple, but let's go on camera, and I will just copy the whoops. I'll just copy the focus distance and paste it into my redshift focus distance here. I'll pump down the CRC radius, circle of confusion, and I will get a bokeh image. There is a tutorial on my YouTube channel how to do like a bokeh image. Cool. So we are good with that. Let's restart our redshift here. And of course that's like currently really simple, but we can introduce some more detail into our in our material network. For example, a max on noise, and use that as a bump input. For example, the Luca is pretty common, or I like to use that a lot, and we can use a curvature to determine the curvature of our geometry. Go down with the radius, maybe make it convex or concave, that's fully up to you. And we can use that, for example, with a material blender, and we can blend several materials together. So that will be our first material, and we will make a second material. Let's make it like a copper material. Always go for copper. Copper is nice. And we can use that as our layer color 1, and our blend color will be the curvature node, and we can hit that up, and now you can see we've successfully blended two materials with the curvature. And now for the Luca noise here, we can make a RS bump, and we can pipe that, for example, just in one material, so maybe the upper material here, or the first material. And let's play a little bit with the color here, maybe make it white and make it rough, and pipe that into the bump input, and of course play with the height scale here a little bit. Pump up the resolution, because I think that's pretty low. Yes. And maybe let's go for another angle here. Of course you can do like another camera angle. For example, something like that here. And the DOF is maybe a little bit too high, so let's go down with that one. And now you can, of course, play with your materials. So, for example, on an overall material, maybe just use glass. Why not? Let's use glass, pipe up the roughness, and you will get, I think, a really cool look out of that. Then you can, of course, let's do that as a last little example. Go not for a sphere. Let's go for like a mixed up geometry. So let's get a sphere here. Let's get a scatter. Let's scatter a few points on here, so maybe 5 points. Let's grab our attribute randomize P scale. Let's go and get a copy to points, and we will copy the sphere onto there. Pipe up the global scale. Maybe influence the values a little bit, and you can then like redirect your global shape here to something like that. Then what we can do, we can use the VDB from Polygon. We can use let's go with a higher resolution here, maybe to 0.025, and after that we can use a VDB smooth SDF and smooth the hell out of that maybe 10 iterations and a voxel filter radius of 2. Yeah, why not? Maybe the scale a little bit smaller. Yeah, something like that. And convert it back to polygons. Convert VDB, convert it back to polygons, and get the noise on that thing here. Of course we need to influence the scale here a little bit. Maybe something like that, and maybe make it lower. And the overall frequency is maybe too high, so we can get that lower here. Maybe 0.25 or 0.5. So that's again fully up to you, and let's maybe use our anti-aliased noise, for example. So just pipe that into a mount here. And we need a little bit more resolution, I think. So 0.01 for the VDB from polygons. And maybe one subdivide after that. So subdivide loop. Yeah, that's now 12 million. Let's get a little bit, maybe 0.015. Let's get it maybe to like around 5 million. Perfect, perfect. Then we can get our noise on top of here, and then we can try to render that, for example. So it's just a matter of experimenting, playing with different nodes, and we will got here several bunched planets bunched together, for example. Of course you then can, for example, do a particle simulation on top of that. So that's fully up to you. And now you can play with the material here and create something like that. So I think we are done for now. So you can play with the materials, with the shapes, and so on. And I think that turned out pretty cool. In the end, of course, now you can again get a little bit DOF. Of course, when you make a space render, that's a little bit unrealistic, but yeah, just play around with the shapes, with the colors, especially with the colors. Colors can have a really big influence on the final look you will go for, or you want to achieve, for example. And you can just play with that, play with the color, play with the inputs, play with the lighting. So set up your own lighting, or play around with HDRI lights, and just come up with a good result. And I hope you learned something, some tricks and tips, and I will see you in the next course, on my next Patreon, or on the next YouTube tutorial. So stay safe and have a nice day.